AZ-ATSSA's Vice President of Government Relations, who will facilitate a conversation with our special guest today. Nate?
Great, thanks, Jesus. We have today Congressman Greg Stanton, who represents the city of Phoenix in Washington, D.C. in the House of Representatives. Formerly, the congressman was the mayor of Phoenix, and in one of his roles as a U.S. congressman, he also sits on the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. He's a big infrastructure advocate, has been when he was a mayor, and continues to be so in the House of Representatives today. So with that, Congressman, nice to see you again. Under different circumstances for sure. Last time we've seen each other, it was certainly face-to-face back in DC. So good to see that looks like you're doing well and safe and sound. He's muted again, Jen.
Okay, there we go.
I said, as safe and sound and doing okay under the circumstances. Thank you for that introduction, Nate, and Jesus and the whole team here in Arizona. And I'm looking forward to having a good dialogue. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about infrastructure investment, and particularly transportation infrastructure investment, something I'm passionate about today. But none of these conversations should occur or do occur outside the context of what America is going through. I know I speak on behalf of everyone on this call that we are praying so much for the family of George Floyd, that they can receive justice in light of the tragic murder that occurred in Minneapolis last week. And we see the appropriate protests are going on around the United States of America, mostly peaceful. I know the ones that are not so peaceful get most of the media attention, but the truth is that with recent events in America, that tragic murder, the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, tragic killing of Breonna Taylor in Louisville, our country is going through a soul-searching process right now. All of us are hurting, and we're all trying to figure out, myself as a member of Congress, but I'm sure all of you as business leaders and community leaders in your own right are figuring out what we can do to be part of the solution. I will be back in Washington next week. I serve, in addition to being on transportation infrastructure, which is where my experience and expertise is, I also serve on the Judiciary Committee, and we will be having a very important hearing on the issue of police violence and what can we as a country do, because we all want it. We all want to improve. What can we do to take steps to reduce violence that communities of color in particular suffer in the United States of America? And so you've probably heard some of the ideas that are out there in terms of much better reporting about incidents of violence and who is suffering from that. We actually don't have a database. We're looking at demilitarizing our local law enforcement, and by not allowing the military to provide military-style weapons to local law enforcement. We're looking at chokeholds and whether chokeholds should continue to be a way to subdue individuals, or whether or not we've seen enough of the damage that can be done by that we should put a stop to it. And so, you know, I know we want to talk about infrastructure today, but I know our hearts are heavy, all of us. Every single person's call are suffering in various ways as we try to come to terms with things in America that we just haven't done a very good job of coming to terms with. And my job is mostly to listen and to step outside my comfort zone, and to really try to be part of the solution. So obviously, as our country is dealing with the protests that are going on around the country, in the meantime, we're also still dealing with COVID and COVID-19 and the incredible changes that have brought to our society as a result of that. In Arizona, where I'm from, we have opened up a little bit sooner than Washington and many other parts of the country. I'm a little bit frustrated by that because I feel like we haven't taken the appropriate steps really necessary to open up as safely as possible in terms of providing testing to as many people as we should, as well as we don't really have a significant contact tracing system in place. And I'm really frustrated that the administration has not taken advantage of the Defense Production Act to really provide more certainty to people in what is just a completely chaotic system of entities trying to get personal protective equipment for themselves and others that are in essential positions. Let me give you a specific example. The Phoenix Fire Department, obviously I'm the former mayor of Phoenix, and so they have a good working relationship with me. The Phoenix Fire Department did call me and say that they were trying to purchase personal protective equipment for themselves and Phoenix Police and 24 other agencies in my community, which represents 4.5 million people. That's how many people are in Maricopa County, one of the largest counties in the country. They were trying to do a large purchase for PPE for all of those individuals, law enforcement entities. And it turned out that the price for the PPE was going to be 6 times what the price listing was. It was blatant price gouging. And of course, even with making some of the purchase, they couldn't buy nearly as much PPE as they wanted. FEMA came in and took some of it and used it for other purposes. And so you have this chaotic system in which police and fire entities are trying to compete against hospitals, and they're competing against grocery store companies that are trying to protect their frontline workers, that are keeping our food supply safe, that are competing against long-term care facilities and our senior community, competing against the state of Arizona and other state government entities, competing against federal entities as well. And it doesn't have to be that way. The president, I'm obviously a critic of the president. We want to go too far down that field here, but I think leadership, when someone has not provided the leadership that our country has needed, whether it is in response to the ongoing protests in the United States or as it relates to not keeping entities as safe as possible, particularly police and fire during this crisis, I've got to use my bully pulpit and call that out, and I've certainly done so. So I feel like as we open up, we're not nearly as prepared to open up as we could have been, and that's going to provide less confidence for people to go back out, particularly in the school setting, because schools are going to be opening here in Arizona in the fall. Now, I voted for every single one of the COVID-related bills. By the way, we've had 5 bills. 4 of the 5 bills have been significantly bipartisan. The most recent one, the HEROES Act, did have some Republican support, but not much. And that's really going to be the starting point of ongoing and continuing negotiations with our friends on the Senate side. But the numbers are staggering. The CARES Act is over $2 trillion. The HEROES Act is closer to $3 trillion. I get asked a lot about that, about the amount of proposed spending that we're doing on the House side. My answer is probably what you've heard elsewhere, which is fighting this virus and fighting off we hope and pray, not a depression level economic crisis. Fighting that off is really expensive. The alternative is even more expensive and worse for the American economy. We have to keep people employed. We have to keep the American economy going as reasonably strongly as possible. And because we want to minimize the damage that this virus is putting on both the American health as well as the American economy. And so there are no easy options, and we're going to continue to try to do the right thing. I particularly, in the CARES Act, went to bat for aviation and airports. As mayor, we did run Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, and so our aviation director did ask me to really go to bat for airports around the country. I know those are major construction zones, and those bonds have to be paid, and if we don't provide that support, thousands and thousands of workers would be added to the unemployment line. So we have major projects going on in our community. I did go to bat for universities as well. Arizona State University, the largest university in America, is located in my district. And we made that case strongly. And obviously, both of those entities were significantly supported in the CARES Act. Sky Harbor received $140 million. Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport, which is a reliever airport in the far east valley of my community, received $20 million. ASU received over $60 million in CARES Act support. Obviously, moving forward, we're going to have some difficult but important negotiations with the Senate about what a next relief package needs to look like. I think you're hearing more and more from senators that they realize they're going to have to do at least one more relief package, and so the question is what that's going to include. I, as a local elected official, having spent so many years in local government, is going to make a strong case that state and local support is incredibly important. Law enforcement and support for law enforcement is important. And that's mostly what the city budget is. And we don't want people to be laid off during this terrible time, particularly police officers and firefighters. At the state level, education and healthcare is such a big part of state budgets, and we don't want to have cuts, significant cuts to education right now. And of course, on healthcare, the Medicaid side, people need more support for Medicaid and access to Medicaid, particularly as people are losing jobs, et cetera, rather than the other way around. And so I'm certainly going to be a strong advocate for state and local funding, in addition to continued support for small business and locally owned business, like we've seen with the PPP program, which has not been perfect, but I think it's generally been a good thing, as well as more support for SNAP benefits, so people have food security during this time. And then in Arizona, particularly important is LIHEAP funding, the low-income housing energy assistance program. The summer heat, the extreme heat can be deadly. We need to make sure that people have support to pay their electric bills so they keep the air conditioning on during this incredibly hot summer. And I'm going to continue to be an advocate for a much larger infrastructure investment package. I did stand with and support Chairman DeFazio in the announcement that was made back in January about the level of funding that we should put into infrastructure investments, $760 billion over 5 years, including $80 billion for broadband investment, both in rural and Native American communities. I'm going to continue to be a advocate for that. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about the surface transportation bill, and I don't want to get ahead of my chairman, so I can't talk too many details about that, because I think Chairman DeFazio is going to make an announcement later today. But you can pretty much bet I'm going to be supportive of Chairman DeFazio and the significant surface transportation investments, investments that he is planning on announcing. I think it's maybe later today. So it's going to be today's an important day in the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. All right, I already talked too long. So let's open it up and have a good dialogue with everyone. And if you want to talk about infrastructure, COVID, or issues as it relates to police community trust building as a result of these terrible tragedies that occurred more recently, any of those issues are open for discussion.
Great. Thanks, Congressman. You commented on state and local assistance in a sort of subsequent COVID relief package. One of the areas that we as ATSSA are really supportive of is getting some of those dollars to state departments of transportation and county and city governments for their transportation departments. Our fear is, even if we enact Chairman DeFazio's soon-to-be-released highway bill, if the DOTs themselves aren't solvent enough, then none of that money is going to hit the road, because there'll be no operational funds. So any comments sort of on work to be done to ensure that departments around the country are receiving the needed assistance that they do need in order to keep going forward?
Look, I mentioned the investment in education and healthcare. Equally as important is continued investment in transportation projects, and DOTs and the city and county do need our support. The number I remember is $50 billion is what they're asking for to continue, so that they can continue with these projects, for the exact same reason that I went to bat for airports and airport investment, because we got to keep people employed, and those capital projects that are going on in so many major airports, including Sky Harbor Airport in Phoenix, just incredibly important for the future economic development, incredibly important to keep people employed today. For those exact reasons, I'm very supportive of the $50 billion number for state DOTs and other transportation entities, so we can keep projects. They got to keep them going. This is not the time to put those projects on a shelf somewhere and delay them. Now's the time to be working on those projects. I don't need to tell anyone on this call, but I've seen it with my own 2 eyes. The best investment we can make as Americans is investment in education and in infrastructure, if we want to continue to be the leading economy on planet Earth. And it's more important now than ever to do it during these difficult economic times. And they pay dividends, not just in the short run to keep people employed, but obviously in terms of the long, any investment in infrastructure inevitably pays for itself in the long run. And certainly I'm going to be as supportive as I can of those investments.
You also commented that Chairman DeFazio of the House Transportation Committee is imminently going to be releasing legislation to reauthorize the highway program. I know you indicated you don't want to get too far ahead of him. Can you shed detail? Detail might be the wrong word, but information on the scope of this legislation. I assume it's at the very least includes a 5-year highway bill reauthorization. Are there add-ons to that as well?
Yes. I can't say anything else. I don't. If DeFazio finds out, I will say our bill. How about this? Our bill will be better than the Senate bill.
Okay.
And much more comprehensive, obviously including public transportation, rail, public transportation investments as well, which, Chairman DeFazio and I are on the exact same page on those issues. And that's my claim to fame as mayor was being a strong advocate for public transportation investments. And I know Chairman DeFazio feels the same way. So I think it's fair to say that our bill will be much more comprehensive than the Senate. The Senate really hasn't even finished theirs. They did surface, but they still have to get the other elements to really, so we can actually have a negotiation and come to a deal. But as I sit here, we're moving forward. We're in the House side. We're going to move forward very, very quickly. So you're going to see a lot of momentum behind getting behind that. And this is not a political or a bash time of the president. I've told people I'm not a fan of the president. I'm really unhappy with a lot of his decisions. But if he really gets behind an infrastructure bill, I'll happily stand with him and support that. For our Republican friends in the House to really get behind a significant investment, it's going to take presidential leadership. And I hope and pray that presidential leadership really comes in the short run. And just make it a political question. Look, the president's not doing well politically. You see in Arizona, he's down 7 or 8 points right now. The smartest thing he could do is to work with the House Democrats and get behind a real infrastructure bill. Smartest thing for his own reelection. And I would, even during a political time, I would certainly stand with him if he does the right thing on infrastructure investment.
Well, as ATSSA, we're certainly looking forward to working with you all on the committee from the safety perspective and ensuring that the bill has a robust infrastructure safety program for guardrail and traffic signs and ped and bike safety and that sort of thing.
It's got to be comprehensive, and you better believe with Chairman DeFazio, it will be, and the details are to come, and we can do a call like this in the near future once the details are released.
Okay, that sounds good. A reminder to everyone on the Zoom that if you've got a question, you can toss it into the chat box, and we'll be able to address that. So looking forward, how do you see the timeline rolling out for highway bill reauthorization / infrastructure? We have an announcement this week. We also have to have everything finalized into the president by October 1 or face an extension. Can you walk us through that timeline a little bit?
Okay, I think the answer is I'm going to do my part to get this thing going as quickly as possible, and use my role as a member of the committee to push it as hard as we can. I want to be realistic. October 1st is a very ambitious timeline. So is there going to be a short extension? I can't. I'm not in leadership, so I don't know the answer to that. But do I think it's a distinct possibility? Yes. But regardless, on our side, we've got to move aggressively and get the momentum going to really motivate the Senate to start to take up their bill. And wish we had done this previously, to be perfectly frank.
So how important is it for our members, those are on the call and some others, to be engaging with their elected officials? And what's the best way? This is a unique period in legislating right now. So is it important, and how best to do so for our folks who want to engage and help you guys get the highway bill across the line?
You're a pro at this, and you and your organization are really a strong organization. And so direct communication, when I say direct, I mean face-to-face, or in this case, Zoom to Zoom, is the best way of getting that message across. And oh, by the way, in so many ways, a Zoom call is easier than organizing a real face-to-face meeting. There are less travel issues and all that kind of stuff. So our elected officials, even those that may be a little more reluctant than myself to really be passionate advocates for a significant transportation infrastructure comprehensive bill. Because Zoom has now become all a part of our lives, the barrier to get a face-to-face or a Zoom-to-Zoom meeting is almost nothing. You have to ask for 15 minutes of the elected officials' time. So take advantage of this time and do these kind of meetings with every elected official, even the ones that say they will never support you. Because you never know, honestly, you don't know what the politics may be as we get close to the election. And there may be a lot more members that feel that the pressure to get something practical and bipartisan done and get that on their records, if you will, before the election. So I'm optimistic about our chances of getting something big done in a relatively short period of time.
One of the things we're hearing from state departments of transportation around the country is a fear of being unable to meet their state matches next year because of reduced funding into trusts, both state and federal trust funds. So even if we did a large infrastructure package, there's a fear out there that 20%, generally speaking, that 20% match will be hard to be met. Do you know if there's conversations about that, without getting into the details, of course, but is that part of that discussion? Is that realization being considered?
Yes, but here's my quick answer on that one, okay? This is a difficult issue because I am a former local elected official. I balance the budget every year for 7 years. I've got some battle scars to prove it, because when you have to balance a budget, you can't make everyone happy, and you have to balance these interests. I want to be I do not want major cuts in parks, libraries, and public safety. That's not acceptable during these difficult times. I don't want to see major cuts to education or transportation budgets or to healthcare budgets. But I also don't want governors to be wimpy. I don't want governors to look only to the federal government and not do what they have to do during the war. I'm not proposing any particular thing, but in Arizona, after the last recession, our very conservative governor, Jan Brewer at the time, did go to the voters and ask for a revenue increase in order to sustain programs during these difficult times. So everyone's got to do their part. I have to do my part as an advocate in Congress, and state legislatures and governors have to do their part. They can't kind of go back to their partisan corners and say, I'll never even look at new revenue at all. So we have to figure out how we put language in state and local support that motivates state governments to show courage themselves to get this done as well, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It's got to be a balancing act.
It looks like we do have one question. Sean, are you there? You wanted to ask a question?
Oh, yes. So I was just wondering about the Tonto Creek Bridge funding. Any update on that?
Thank you.
As I sit here, I don't have an updated briefing, so I apologize. I wasn't prepared for that one, but I'll make sure. I'll work with Nate, and I don't know who asked the question. I'll make sure I get a quick answer to him as soon as this call is done.
Okay. Sean, we'll get back to you on that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I apologize. I was not prepared today with an immediate update.
And with that, I don't think we have any more questions in the chat box, Jen, right?
Nope.
Okay. Well, thank you, Congressman. We appreciate your time. I know you probably got a million of these going on. It's a great way for Arizonans to be engaged with their officials, as you commented. So hopefully.
Well, I just want to make a quick mention, which is I'm glad we did today's Zoom call. I know it's during a very difficult time in America right now, but we have to be able to lead on many fronts, even during the most challenging times. So it's important that as we deal with racial healing issues, which are the most important right now, front and center, we're also leading on investments that need to be made to keep the American economy as strong as possible. And Nate, it's been great to work with you and your professionalism. I really appreciate that. And I want everyone on the call to know, if there's something that came up later on that you thought about, please reach out to my office anytime. And if you want to do a 10 or 15-minute Zoom call, I mean, I talked about doing that to other elected officials, but that applies to myself as well. If you have a particular issue you're dealing with, let me know. I'm here to help, and I'm looking for ideas. And
the Congressman is one of the most engaged members of the T&I committee, so you guys are lucky in Arizona to to have a really sort of engaged elected member on that committee. So that's great.
All right, appreciate it. Look forward to seeing everyone face to face once we get through this darn COVID crisis.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right,
well,
take it
thanks
easy.
again. Take care.
All right, take it easy. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. This concludes the meeting. I just wanted to remind everyone that the recording will be posted on the chapter webpage within 24 hours. And we appreciate you being here today. Bye-bye.